ultimately is moving forward. It's an indicator that's it's static. We don't want people to be confused that it's going to change, and in order to have something to begin the year, we put something that's not really the metric as we're measuring it in the second and third kind of time we get to present it.
Mr. Tuzar, where would you say it fits better then?
That's a good question. I think it's important to understand. I mean, we're up about 5% from the prior year. I mean, I think that's a nice thing. I think I would say when we get to that, I'm going to forget the name of it when we come in November.
The SAR.
The SAR.
You spend a significant amount of time.
I know. I just do the data. I don't name it. So I think it fits in there as kind of our health and where we've been, and that's where we'll show the longitudinal data. And I think that's kind of where we wanted to see this. One of the goals has been, what are we doing with math, and are we helping kids progress a little bit faster? So we'll show the history of that, what it was 2 years ago, last year, moving forward. I think it makes more sense there. And like Dr. Gordon said, we can take the real estate and we can give a little more detail on those grades, and so we can blow that up. I mean, this is one where we're trying to make things presentable, and I'm getting old, the font's getting small. So we're just trying to, does it make sense?
I guess the reason, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So when we adopted back in November, the goals for 2025, we had a 50% Algebra 1 completion by 8th grade. One of the challenges is how will the board have a pulse on whether or not we're making progress toward that. If there's a better measure than this static measure that we'll review annually, what's the measure? I think there's, from my point of view, I'm happy if the measurement, the intra-year, inter-month measure is something other than this static measure. I'd be comfortable with that. I'd just like to better understand what that could be. But I think keeping a pulse on that particular marker is important for us.
I would agree with that. That would be my only hesitation about removing this. I like the fact that it is front and foremost in folks' minds. I think only looking at it on an annual basis in November on the SAR, I think is too late. So that would be my comment.
And I also think it's a public statement, and it shows anyone who's looking at our district that that's a good percentage of kids who are taking algebra at 8th grade, even if it doesn't change. It's something that we should be proud to share.
I also like seeing it more frequently, so I would be in favor of having it on our dashboard, whether we're making this as a requirement and shooting for this as a district. I think those can be two separate things.
I'm good. I think the most important thing is for the board, and this is static. That piece generally will not go up. Very few kids would enroll later into that course at a later date.
Let's talk about, for a second though, would it not make sense, and you'd probably have to have a footnote to it to notate, but would it not make sense at end of semester 1, end of semester 2, to either define the percentage as the percentage in algebra with, I guess, if C or better as the litmus test, or have a second data point?
I think at the semesters it makes most sense.
Yeah.
That's what I was hearing.
One of the things we're going to do is, as this dashboard is live, is the students actively enrolled at that moment. So the underlying end is going to change. And we put a note in there, we want 5% mobility, kids move in and kids move out. It's not an exact, hey, these kids moved out of algebra, these kids moved in.
Right.
We're talking, different things here. So that percent may shift because the end shifted, and it may look like there's a change in the system when it's really just a change in the underlying data. We're not going to hold that bottom number static. So I would be a little careful about doing that, because I think it can create a perception of something that's not there. What we've done in the past is simply, in this moment in time, right now, at this moment in time, we have 45.3% of our kids either enrolled in algebra or on. At semester, we'd be the kids in the geometry, they've got the yes in that column, and then the 8th graders in algebra, are they getting a C or better? If we go back to the original one, and that underlying end has changed, like it's 850 here, it's 840 here, and we have that weird year where 10 of them are algebra kids, we can start shifting that percent, all get small. I just want to make sure that the data we're doing is consistent. Like, this is a snapshot in time. we're not
I think
doing
that's what
one,
we're,
two,
I think we're saying the same thing.
Okay, so I don't want, so we're saying like, we're just gonna repeat it with new, right? We're not gonna, like, here it was, here it was, here it was.
Right.
Okay.
Right, what I was really honing in on is at the semester mark,
Yes.
that we could see, it's lovely that 45% are still in algebra, but really what matters at the end of the day is how successful
Did they
are
pass?
they? And are they, the right, are they ready?
Perfect.
Would it be possible if that percentage changed based upon the aggregate number of students, would it be possible just to put an annotation in there if it's a significant change?
Yeah, if it was significant. I just want to be careful with this. It just, because in my life, it's always that 0.01% that changes the tenth, and it changes something else the way we round it, and somebody's like, everything's off, so, okay.
So what I hear the board say is that we're going to keep this into the data. Oh, sorry.
I was going to chime in here. I'd rather see the GPA, especially if this is a static piece. And I don't know if there's any option. One of the things that we've gotten feedback on, or at least I've gotten feedback on, is just absences across the board. I don't know if there's a faculty absence indicator that would be amenable to us and SCEA to show on here as well.
We would have to talk further about that. That hasn't been part of any of the success indicators or last year's data dashboard. That would be
Right.
something totally new.
I think, Mr. Lentz, I think your point is certainly well taken in your input. I would recommend that we defer that to one of our upcoming larger topic meetings, because it wasn't part of the initial strategic plan approved the end of June, and isn't on our student achievement annual review either. So if everybody.
That sounds good, Mr. Berger.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so what I heard was that we're going to keep the 8th graders taking Algebra 1. What we will do is an update at the semester, at the end of the first semester, and at the end of the year where we'll see it. And Mr. Shazar will make sure that the data is accurate with any notation of any changes there. So let's move into the grades. So we can keep the...
Sorry, but you're still going to keep the I-ready.
Correct. Everything, yeah, that's the only change. Thank you for that clarification. So, board members, on the 9th graders being pulled out separately, we would also, in addition, we would also have the 6th through 12th GPA broken down by grade level. We're recommending that it would be repetitive, at least for the 9th grade, to have that one pulled out. The board will still get the same exact information. So, board members? I'm seeing that we're good with this?
Yeah,
That we
I think so.
we would take that off as its standalone. We'd have 6th through 12th grade grades under the percent of students with a B or better, B or above GPA. So we do gain back a little bit of real estate. Okay, so we'll set those two aside, but again, the important piece around the data dashboard is this will be our monthly check-in on different components of the strategic plan that are tracked more on a monthly basis rather than some of the other ones that are either annually or semester based. So let's switch over to the next slide, Pedro. Perfect. So what you see here, this is just a draft, a blank draft of the mid-year report with all of the different breakdowns. Remember, under the success indicators, we broke them down into levels: EC2, intermediate, 3 through 5, middle school, 6 through 8, high school learners, 9 through 12 plus, on here with, again, the ABCs. At top is an on track. On track is where are we at with percent of students for EC2 that met 2 of the 2 indicators. You'll go across the line, percent of students that met 4 of 5 indicators, percent of students who met 4 or 5 indicators, and then 9th through 12th, 9th through 11th students that meet 3 out of the 3 indicators, and the 12th grade students that met 4 out of the 5. Why we did that, again, was no student is absolutely perfect on each of these, and a little bit of grace within there. But we know through the research that these ABCs are some of the best predictors of how students will be successful in their middle school, from their middle school success, how that will blend over into the high school, and their high school success, how that blends into college and beyond. So we're really proud of these success indicators. Dave, anything that you would highlight from a high level on this, on the blank, or will you want to wait till we get into the data portion?
Just on this one, I need to make a footnote on the state test. What we're going to do is we're going to roll over the prior year data because we're not going to have anything mid-year. So we're just going to say, if we have your test scores, if you're a 4th grader with your 3rd grade test score, we're just going to roll it up and say, what was that? And we're going to use that as current year data. Because we're not going to have any 3rd grade state test data because they were 2nd grade the prior year. We're just going to take that, whatever 3rd grade was as a grade, and we're going to roll that up. Because otherwise we miss an entire grade level and we can skew the ultimate data. So it's our proxy of what 3rd grade was. Our 4th and 5th grade will be their test scores from the prior year. So we're trying to create something mid-year that doesn't really exist, and that's our way of creating it, just to kind of get that litmus test of what does it look like on our path.
Can you either footnote those types of things or just have a page that lists the assumptions?
That's a great idea. Thank you. We'll make sure that happens. Okay, on the next one. Oh, sorry.
Just a quick question. Actually, it's something that Mr. Chazar just made me think about it a little bit. You know, as we have the sub-scores from grade 11 for SAT, does it make sense for us to have a spot anywhere on this so we have a little bit of a year-over-year comparison from each of those sub-scores? We should have the data. Not everybody will have completed data, but we could have some of the data that we just embed right above the SAT SuperScore stuff from their 12th grade year. And it might be a decent point to say, hey, we are seeing incremental improvement year over year. Again, it would be comparing slightly different data because we have a super score versus, I believe, which would be just sub-scores. But I think it might be noteworthy. And I suppose this is more of a question out loud to the board and to the administration. And Mr. Chazar, if you feel like this is a data point that we can capture and it would also maybe call out some improvement year over year for our district. And when you just talked about kind of rolling over some of the previous data, made me think about that a little bit.
Can you help me understand what you mean by the sub-score?
So the scores that they would receive in 11th grade when taking the SAT for the first time prior to super scoring it for the optimal score while they're exiting their high school experience.
So and that's one where there's not in aggregate going to be a lot of change between 11 and 12.
Yeah.
Most of the students through 11th grade will have a handful of students that are continuing to take the SAT. You know, sometimes we like that between the summer, but between 11th and 12th, we're not going to see a lot of change. We are keeping this as just the SAT score, and so we also don't see like the percentage of sophomores taking the SAT. It's really, they take it their junior year, and they might take it 2, 3, 4 times in their junior year. But really in that year, it's like that's the most of it. It's a little bit of tail here and a little bit of tail here. And we're not going to see much because this one is just the SAT.
Right.
That's one that's the score that's going to translate.
But we would be aggregating the sub-scores in order to create this super score, correct?
Correct.
So we would presumably have that data available to us, and that's why I was just curious, again, food for thought more so than anything. It's a different ask than we've asked for before.
Because
I just wonder if it would be helpful for us to see the improvement.
Well, and the seniors, they don't take the SAT, at least through our standard school day. So I think it's a worthwhile point. I would agree.
I just thought I need some help on this.
So, see if I understand, because I'm a little confused. So you want to see what our 11th graders are doing,
Yes.
and then what changes when they put together the super score?
Well, right, so this would basically be like 2 data points reporting, right? So you have if you just take one cohort, their 11th grade SAT score is 1, and then we take the snapshot again, probably I'm guessing in October of their senior year, and you can see that cohort. And then as we start tracking it, we should have 2 years and 2 cohorts tracking through.
And I think they populate this data on it's been a while since I've been in the admissions world, but I believe it's populated on the Illinois report card. Please don't quote me on that exact site, and I think it makes for some decent comparative analytics between us and some of our peer or aspirational districts. We just have another data point to consider. But if most of the board doesn't feel that way.
I don't know what it tells us.
It tells us the trajectory of growth, because I would hope that they score this way on their junior year, and then they have an entire year with our educators getting ready. Maybe they're taking the test a few more times or whatever, and then we can take a snapshot their senior year, because really what matters in large part is the junior year and how they perform, really.
So I think making sure that if we were to do that, that we would, very similar to a prior conversation, that number of students taking in their senior year is significantly reduced. I mean, we're talking, it's a small number of students who are taking that test in their senior year, so we need to make sure that we grab that data. So I'm making up a number, 200 students who took this overall.
Yeah, it's less than that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so just so we know that it's not I can see taking the 11th grade number, and that's our number, and then at a different time saying, okay, another 42 students took it in their senior year. This is their total combined super score for that group at the end of their 12th grade year. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and I don't know what the right, off the cuff, I would think the right snapshot, we do it in October as a district, so I would use the junior October SAT performance, and I'd look again in October for the senior population and then the new junior population. And I don't know, we'd have to look at the data. To your point, there may be such a small number that maybe.
We just live with 11th grade.
Yeah,
We're also not looking for monthly updates on this.
No.
It would be a
No.
mid-year and then an annual review, because presumably the data would change from first semester to second semester in that junior year, to your point of multiple students taking the exam multiple times in an effort to adjust their super score.
So I have anecdotal data of that score dramatically increasing within my household.
Oh, for sure.
And from one year to the next. So I would be interested to see that myself. And since it is just a 1 year, one time, I don't think it doesn't seem like it's too onerous. And I heard Mrs. McCabe said it doesn't follow the cohort. And that's true, I guess, but in one sense that becomes the cohort then.
That's what,
So, and it's a cohort that then we can follow. And I think it's a maybe a minor piece of data, but I think it's a valuable piece of data.
So are we talking the same cohort, their 12th grade data, and then their 11th grade data?
11th grade.
as far as the grade, yes, but to your point.
So let's just take
I
this
understand what you're
2024.
saying.
The 2024 12th graders, and then the 2024 12th graders, when they were in 11th grade in 23, that's the other data point.
Mhm.
Okay.
Or mid-year changes that would be significant as well, right?
Yeah.
Or mid-year changes that would be significant in that 11th grade as well, because there could potentially be significant changes in the score.
This is going to come out in December, so we'll have every data up to that point that we have, and then we'll do it again at the end of the year, all we have up to that point. We can put it on there and see it. As a district in aggregate, it's going to be.
I think it's an opportunity to look at it, see if it's helpful for the board in the long run.
So
I
I
think
have
the
a
point
couple of
that-
concerns here about this SAT 1080 super score. If 100% of our students have super score of 1080, we don't get anywhere close to the 1250 that we adopted last November at a mean score level. So we could move everybody to 1080. Some people would move backwards, some people would move forward. The way the measure is shown today, it's the percentage of students who have achieved a super score of 1080. How do we move? How do we keep track of the fact that we have a 1250 mean score goal that we adopted in November? When I look at a measure like this, it doesn't tell us whether or not we'll get there. And so without the mean reflected or some kind of range associated with the mean, this measure is insufficient from my point of view. So we could have the discussion about the cohorts, but as I look at that measure in as a snapshot, to me, it seems insufficient.
I just want to, with the discussion with the data point of looking at juniors and seniors, when we have that on our dashboard, I want to make sure that as a board, we're not seeing, to your point, Mr. McNally, that when students take it again and again and again, they do tend to see an increase, and I don't want that to be a data point that we're looking at saying all of our students are doing this. I just really want to make sure that we're keeping in mind that this is a much smaller group, so that we're not seeing all this growth that really isn't in the same, they're not apples to apples to me, so I just want to make sure that we're seeing it in the two different slots, a different, there could be 42 or something, using your number, but I just want to make sure we're really clear on that.
To address that concern, that's why I said this becomes a new cohort of its own. That we're obviously not looking at all students are retaking. And so I made that point that this becomes a cohort of its own, and it may be a small data point, but I think a valuable one. I think it's a valuable one to encourage students to look and say, improvement does occur.
So, I think to Mr. Lackner's point, this is really our way of looking at how we're doing to reaching our targets. And I have a belief you can't expect the junior class to hit 1250 when they didn't have all the other stuff they needed before they got to their junior year. But, so I would go, why are we doing it? What's the purpose? What's the message that we are going to take? And I would just ask, is the super score, because I kind of recall when we were talking about this a while ago, we wanted to show that our kids were performing higher when we look at their super score than when they just take it in their 11th grade year. But it's not all kids. But then on the other hand, sorry, this may be a little disjointed, on the other hand, it does send a message to families. Maybe you want your kid to take it again. So I don't know what the real message is here. Are we trying to see whether or not we're on target, or what our or what the 11th graders do versus those kids who take it more than once? So I just want to be sure we know why we're doing what we're doing.
So for my part, really the big thing for me is this is an encouragement to people to say, yes, there's improvement. Encourage people to perhaps, if they didn't get the score they wanted, to perhaps retake it. I think a good message that an educational institution can send out is perseverance is valuable.
I don't object to the super score, but we still have to discuss the other issue, which is the count of students who, even with their super score, achieve a 1080, could be 100% of all students across every cohort, and will get nowhere near 1250 in terms of a mean score for the district.
Well, is this real data that we're looking at?
It's no data.
It's no data. It's categorical data versus a mean. So it's just 1080 as a goal, the 1080 goal, and then counting every student who has achieved a 1080 doesn't measure whether or not our mean score as a district has moved closer to 1250 or not. So I just think the whole measure could be.
Can we just change it to the mean score?
So one of the things that you did ask a while back, as this one has had the most amount of discussion on it, I think the board would agree. One of the things that you did ask and that we will provide is breaking down where are students scoring at. So we know where are the top quartile of students, where are they at, so when we look across the board, that we have that better sense broken down, which I think would be even more meaningful than just a mean score. So you see those different categories, and you see the percentages within each of those groupings to say, oh boy, we've got 3/4 going this direction, but I still have a chunk of students who are in this area over here, which is maybe in the lower 900s or something along those lines. So that's a piece that will be reported out on this document.
I think that what I'm hearing from Mr. Lackner, I think the concern is the threshold, and that we could have everyone to the far right in the 100th percentile at 1080. So is the threshold for what we're measuring?
We don't. So you're looking currently at a blank one. I'll tell you right now, 54% of our students are meeting the 1080. So we have another one for you. This was, remember what we're trying to do here. We're trying to go through this, make sure everybody understands. And then the next slide, we're going to give you some data. How about we do that?
Well, I just want to be sure I'm clear. I think what you're saying is 1080 is too low, because if a kid gets a 1250, they're going to be in the 1080. And we won't know how many kids are.
We will.
But you will with these percentiles, and I think at least for me, the missing piece was where we're at today, and that 54% is meeting. So we have
some ways to go.
Yeah.
So let's
54% are meeting 1080. So if you think
or above.
Yeah.
It doesn't say above, but I know that's what you're saying, but we don't know how many are.
I know. So that was the last thing that I said to Mr. Lackner, that he has been consistently advocating for. I will give him that we will have that breakdown for the board, so you can see what is the percentage of our top scoring students, and broken down in that category. So if we switch slides.
So on that point, just that I would encourage in all test reporting, I think we need to do this. I think we need to give those, not simply the mean, not simply this number met this, but where were we above and below that?
We've got that. We've got that coming to you. Okay, one more slide, Pedro. One more. Thank you, sir. Okay. So on here, you're going to notice not everything's filled out. Why is that? So let's take behavior for an example. We have changed our documentation for behavior in our system. We're organizing that. We're tightening that up. There were significant number of codes under behavior. There was no way that we could put our arms around it. So teams of educators across the district came together and really narrowed that scope. I shared that with the board and last week or the previous week's weekly update, just a much more condensed and focused on those pieces. So this would, going back to last year's data, it would be apples and oranges. It would not be good data to be comparing to. So we're cleaning that one up.
And has that been implemented then now?
Yeah,
so
yes.
Forward?
The new system is implemented this year with the codes, the work. Dave, anything else that you would add on that topic?
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to the monthly dashboard that's on there, right now we're essentially, I think we have less than 10 students is what I can say that hit the threshold. But that's on the new dashboard. That's been implemented. Schools are doing a nice job with it.
Okay.
Please.
2025 school year. What is that? 25 to 26 school year for on the left? These things that are going to be implemented.
Oh yes, the common formative assessments, as we spoke last week at the PLC meetings. Those are those common formative assessments that our educators are making. Right. Those pieces will be implemented the following year, so we have that consistency across the board in our English and math.
So 24-25.
24-25.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So again, attendance. I want to give a shout out to everybody who's really worked hard on attendance. We did a lot of that work last year. We're cleaning up our attendance and making sure that we're consistent across our across the board. Sense of belonging. Dave, I'm going to let you talk about this a little bit. We are going to continue the theme of the Pulse survey, but we're going to do that with our sense of belonging. Dave, you want to talk a little bit more?
Sure. So we're going to give the entire, what we call the SEL survey, in fact, coming up here in a couple of weeks. One of those elements or one of those indexes or components of that was sense of belonging. Is 4 or 5 questions depending on your level. 6 to 12 is 5 questions. 3-5 is 4 questions. The last school Monday of every month, we're going to re-give that very quick, that 5 question, 10 question, as Dr. Warren said, just the pulse. Let's get a sense of it. We're going to watch that across the year. So we want to make sure that we're taking that, we're both showing students that we are using this, we are looking at it, but it needs more timely. And so that'll be, and if you go back to the original monthly dashboard, That'll be updated each month, what that is. And then we'll go across the year. Then the final indicator will be students that meet that index, which is a 3.5 or higher 8 of the 10 months. And they'll be considered in that group of meeting that indicator.
Thank you, sir. Again, there'll be averages on there, state tests, that will be once a year, we'll put it in here, definitely by the end of the year. Success indicators, the whole document will be filled in. And then down below, you see the grade 12 students only early college credit. We'll be tracking that. Dave, myself, and others are working on the industry credentials. We're trying to tighten that definition up and what does that look like for us, but we find this to be an incredibly important one. As I talk to the board, maybe in a weekly update, but my visit to Fox Valley, there is incredible work occurring out there, and our students are receiving certificates out there, meaningful career, living wage jobs that our students are walking out of the Fox Valley with, going into nursing programs, going into fire, into working around electrician work, journeyman work there. So some really good pieces, but we're going to tighten that piece up a little bit. And then as we go into the SAT 1080, that should be at 54%. Dave saw it again last week. He knew there was something a little funky about it, so he and his team went in, and the actual percent is 54% of students meeting a 1080 or better on that. Dave, anything on that you would want to add to?
Yeah, no, we've got the definition sheet. We were missing our early graduates, and then we were double counting certain 12th graders that goal, so we just cleaned it up. We went back and rebuilt our data sets, and we want to make sure we have these rules applied correctly. So that one's on me. We just had a formula that wasn't working right, but we did notice that, and it is fixed. It is a 54.
So one of the pieces that we will add, though, once we have the SAT scores to you, is the appendix that I spoke to you about. That will break that down, so the board has a clean understanding of where our kids are actually at within different categories.
One minor aspect I have as I look through these charts, when utilizing a bar graph, especially when some of these X or Y axis scales are pretty large values, I think it would be helpful, at least for me. I'm having a tough time seeing, is that 48%, is that 46% on the graph? And so if we can maybe just call out the numerical value within that bar, and then we'd be able to see what type of percent changes we would have year over year. I know that most graphing programs will allow you to embed the number right in there. So
that's
I'm
good.
just kind of blind, I couldn't see it. So.
Yeah, you're good. Anything to help?
I have a couple of additional questions, and I'm not done with the 1080 score yet, but I'll come back to that. I see the common formatives in EC2 and 3.5. They're absent from middle school and replaced by the B average. We're moving to common formatives everywhere, so help me understand.
Those will be included in there, into the middle and high school as well.
Okay, is that over time as they get added?
As they get added into there, we'll add those pieces in there, because that's a critical aspect, as Mrs. Keating spoke about last week. So we'll add those in.
So on the second question is on the grade 12 students only.
Yes.
It says grade 12 students only. Do we mean, when we say AP, the count of students who have a 3 on at least one AP test?
It's the percent, yeah.
It's the percent of students who have that. And then I see at the bottom at least one college credit. Is that a combination of both?
Yeah, so the AP, the dual credit, and industry credit are individual, so a student might be in each one of those. It's just those individually. Then the bottom one is the unique count of students. So if you were in all three, you just count once at the bottom. It's just trying to show the different programs and where the enrollment is, or the success is, and then the final one. We can make that look different if that helps.
No, I just wanted to make sure that it's clear what we're counting there. It's not the percentage of students that are enrolled in AP, it's the percentage of students who have 3 or better on a test, at least one test. One of the things that I'm concerned about, we had a long conversation in L&T about the potential for AP pre-calc as a layer in math. We have a lot of AP classes. I suspect we also have lots of students who have many more. And one of the issues that I'm concerned about in the combination of these scores is that we're working rightly and focusing on the folks who have the opportunity to perform better. And so we're using at least one AP class as our measure. And we're going to look at a measure like this and say, well, aren't we grand if we move that to 75%? Well, maybe the count of students that we ought to be looking at is the number who have 5 AP credits, or the number who have at least 3 or 4 dual credit courses. And right now we're looking at 1. We have the same issue with the 1080 hurdle number. When we count the 1080, we have only 54% who have 1080. That's a problem. However, there are a lot of kids who might be at 1100 who we would say, great, 1100. Well, maybe 1100 is not good enough, and we're not focusing on those students with these measures. And so I'm really concerned that these are measures about one particular group of students getting someone over the hurdle into one AP class. What about the students who should be getting over a hurdle into 5 or 6 AP classes? We're not measuring that here, and I think that's a problem.
Again, this piece is really the overall health of the organization. What we know through the research is when a student takes one AP course, their success rate in college and beyond goes through the roof. I hear what you're saying, but I think overall for D303, we want to increase these numbers so more students are successful in that college and career and beyond, and just leaning back into that research.
Yeah, I appreciate the point, and I'm no dispute on the point. What I'm suggesting is that we have 2 measures that are focused on only those students who are getting over that first hurdle that you're talking about. When I see a number like 45% have 1, I wonder, what is the number that have 2? What is the number that have 3? And the reason I wonder that is each one of those students could have twice that number of credits. And we're just not focused there. And so I don't want to avoid helping the students who could have 4 or 5 credits because we're focused on those who have 0 credits. So the absent bar from 45 to 100 is what we're focused on with a chart like
I
this.
hear you.
And that's all. And we see it again in the 1080. And I think that's insufficient. So I appreciate your point, and I believe it to be insufficient.
And with the 1080 one, I believe we have that answer for you, correct? Oh, I think we've answered that by documenting where those numbers are at.
No, I don't think you're understanding my point. Mrs. McKay was on it in that I believe that the threshold that we're talking about here may be too low, or the idea of a threshold may be inappropriate. I'd rather see the cut points and the distribution by major cut points. Because when we focus on only that threshold, we have the opportunity to say, aren't we successful when we've achieved a percentage of students moving over that threshold? And what I'm suggesting is, as a measure on a scorecard for the success of the whole organization, I believe that to be insufficient.
Okay, I just assumed that we had already made that decision as a board, that 1080, and I know you voiced your concern back then, but I thought we had made the decision that the 1080 was where we were at. But if the board wants to reopen that,
but I think we might be able to solve for it in terms of how this is presented.
okay.
So if you think about a distribution, your 1080, that could be your midpoint, and then you're showing how everybody else falls on the sides of that.
Again, that's kind of what
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that
Sorry.
we actually agreed to 1080. I think it was on your recommendation, but we didn't talk about, because we have, as our goals, our targets are much higher.
This is the success indicators. These are the ones for the strategic plan. That's what I'm presenting here tonight. The other pieces in SAR, those are different. So if I misunderstood when the board voted yes on the strategic plan, that's what the board was voting on that night.
And I'm not arguing 1080. I think what I'm hearing
I see what you're saying, though.
Mr. Lackner talk about, I would agree with. I think, and if you can show that the percentage of kids who got a 1200, percentage of kids who got a 1250, I don't even know how high.
We can do a distribution.
1600,
We can do
whatever.
a distribution. That's very simple.
And
It's clean.
you're kind of at
We're-
it already
we're-
with 1080 at 54%. I mean, you're very close.
Yes, so we'll just do that piece to it. So that cleans it up, and I think it answers Mr. Lackner's request of where we're at.
So can
I think.
But let's get one thing done first. Are we good there? With that distribution, with going
Well,
across
so
the board.
that's what I was going to say, is I think that distribution kind of achieves that goal. And again, I'm always for more data. I think that does achieve that goal of providing the information of kind of where our mean is. I think that's just another data point that can be put on there.
Okay, so we'll do that.
Well, I'll leave it at that.
I mean, I just say these are the high level students that achieve X number of these. And then we can do click-throughs or something where I have this box down here and then I've got more detail. I mean, this is what I'm hearing, like this is here, now I want to see more detail. Give me more detail about it and we can start adding things to it. I mean, we can just make this bigger, we can do other things, but like that, to me, I think is what, so that distribution is, here's this overall indicator, just a big measure. If you do this with these other things, you're looking successful. That's what the research showed us. But we can click through and say, what does that really look like? What is that distribution? What does that distribution of scores based on certain values look like? But that would be kind of a click through. If we put everything on here,
It's no longer a dashboard.
it's hard to say these are the indicators, then it's kind of which part of that, like, the whole idea was like there's this number of indicators, as Dr. Gordon said, if you get these indicators, it's a high level thing, like you look like you're going to success. Now, that doesn't mean inside of that, there aren't students that are saying, I'm going for more, or there's different goals in there, but this was the broad one, and then I think we can provide that detail. Does that start to?
I'll say I had the same question that Mr. Lackner had, is when I looked at at least one college credit. You could be one, the other. You could have been somebody who attempted both. You could have been somebody who attempted, 3 classes in both and succeeded at one. And is that a success indicator?
And I think you have to also remember the purpose. I'm going to keep going back to the why. This is a dashboard. I'm going to disagree with you, Mr. Lackner, on seeing how many kids are taking AP classes. I think it needs to be somewhere, but maybe not on this. And maybe we want to add, 2 AP courses. I think it'll get so detailed, it's no longer a dashboard. Now it's whatever it would be. So I like the idea. I can't read what other people are thinking. If you want more information, here's where you click to go find it, and you could dig a little deeper.
Well, I'm stuck, guys. I'm stuck because these are 12th grade students. For all intents and purposes, at the mid-year of 12th grade, we're pretty much finished. And so these are not interim dashboards except to monitor our progress. And when I look at these as categorical variables, I think the aspiration is too low. And so it's not an issue of complexity of the data or even of the display of the data. It is an issue of aspiration. And when I look at the count of one AP class, that's too low. When I look at the count of students who have 1080, I think it's the wrong measure. I understand that it's reflected in the strategic plan as an indicator. Not for 12th grade. 12th grader results when we have a 1250 goal for 2025 that we've adopted as a board. So to me, it's an end measure. I know it shows up on a mid-year dashboard, but we're talking about mid-year of 12th grade. And so it's a bigger challenge than just do we have the data reflected rightly. And Dr. Gordon, I appreciate that you put forward the template first, but we moved directly into the actuals before we exhausted the whole template. And it's in series of the early college credit plus this 1080 that I see the challenge and the persistence of lower expectations that I'd like to see. And so maybe it took seeing it on this one page together for me to have such a reaction to, are our aspirations high enough? And here, I feel like we could do more.
So can maybe you talk a little bit, Dr. Gordon, about, because I'm seeing this as strategic plan, that's what this is, as opposed to where are we as a district, what are we doing? There are two different sets of goals here, and I think maybe that is getting lost to confusion. Could you address that specifically? Because maybe I'm misunderstanding it.
No, I don't think you are. I think what I hear Mr. Lackner saying is you would much rather have the district goal in the SAR as the SAT goal. Would that be accurate? That it'd be the 1250?
I think communicating a lesser goal is contrary to what the board adopted in the November meeting last year. And I think it sets us up for lower expectations. And I think it erodes the value of that 1250 goal. It's not a question of whether or not we display it as the 1250 mean, but I just look at that number and think, is it aspirational enough?
Okay, so Ms. Bell, you're correct. I mean, they're two different measuring points. But if the board so chooses to change it to a more aspirational number, we would still have it on a distribution. You would see where we're at compared to that if that's what the board wants. We'd have to make some changes in the strategic plan. But that's all doable. There's nothing there that's not doable. But I would also say we have 54% of our students who are meeting a 1080 or beyond. I appreciate the distribution. We can put that piece in there. What I absolutely hear you saying is you would much rather have the higher aspirational goal there. At the end, that's what I hear.
I would also like to see the aspirational goal there as well.
Okay.
So does that mean we as a board need to go back and vote again on the strategic plan?
I would say,
because of the way we did that in, Mr. McNally was there too, we talked about the data and looked into the data, and this is what the data lends itself to. That doesn't mean that we as a district aren't reaching for higher, but that was these are what the success indicators are, just like we did with belonging and attendance and grade B versus GPA. Those are the things that we talked about when we had the strategic plan discussion, so I guess I'm confused.
Why don't we?
I think.
Go ahead, Mr. Lentz.
I think part of the discussion with the strategic plan is that it wouldn't overwrite the previous goals set by the board, right? And I'm with Mr. Lackner. I'd like to see the better goal displayed on the success indicators. Whether or not we need to go back and amend it, like I don't know if this is something to footnote or put it in here, right? But I think that the higher goal is something that's better served on this.
Okay, so here's what I would propose to move us forward in this topic and also in the meeting tonight is let's find a time when as a board we can reconvene and look at this in comparison to the strategic plan and see where we might need some revisions, if any, and then if we need to amend something, we can do so by vote.
Okay.
I would suggest we don't need to re-vote on the entire strategic plan.
No.
This was suggested, we need to vote on a revision of one small portion of the.
Right, whatever the amendment might be.
Right.
Okay. Are there any other amendments that we're going to be bringing back? Because I would like to have that tonight. So if Mr. Lackner's other suggestion around AP, I want that tonight. Because I don't want to come back again. We've got to set these so we can
I would
move
include
it
those.
forward.
I would include those two, for sure. The other thing, from my standpoint, I would not let that piece deter anything else on here.
Absolutely not. But
Okay.
I don't want to come back to another meeting and do this again.
Well, I have a question about attendance.
The AP point is well taken, because this has been a point that I've emphasized a couple of times, whether we're populating data that's saying one student, they may have attempted 5 AP classes and passed 1, right? So it's slightly misleading, where it begs further questions about the data. So that's the challenge that I've had with it, whether it be our school profiles, where we populate the data that way. 56% of students are making up an arbitrary percentage passes at least one exam, and it begs the question, okay, how many did they take? Was was the mean, median, and mode. And so long as that information is available in a student treatment report, I'm pretty good with that, because I guess this is supposed to be a snapshot of where we currently are. But the population of that particular data point has been a pain point for me for a while, because it only opens up more questions for me about how many exams, right? We're not mean, median, and mode, and I'm not even saying that necessarily needs to be in this window, but we haven't populated that, to my knowledge, based off of by exam, which is going to let us know about the performance of the students within the exam. And your point is well taken as well about students earning college credit and that helping them to be successful later on. I just think that when the data is populated like this, I have more questions about the graph than the graph can answer.
And this is, goes all the way back to the presentation of AP data. And so that's one of the things that's been a concern. In the past, you know, we had a way we presented it for a long time. We deviated from that. And I think that it's time that we go back to pre-COVID days, look at how that data was presented, and present it that way again.
I would just disagree with that statement, because we brought this to the board. We brought this to the learning teaching meeting. We brought it to the full board for explanation, to make sure that we had the SAR the way the board wanted. And all feedback from last year's SAR was very positive about how we presented that data. I don't want to let that statement be there, because it was so, when I first got here, it was one of the first meetings that I had where that data needed to be cleaned up. And I believe Dr. Igo, myself, learning teaching committee members have really done a good job of making sure that SAR report is exactly where the board wanted it to be. We actually met with board members to sit down and really work through that data. So that might have been from prior years.
Well, and just to provide the context, are you referring to it as it's presented in the SAR report, or historically
No,
it would come in
we used to do
June?
a specific
Yes.
AP data report. So
Yes.
I'm not,
Okay.
the SAR is
Okay,
it's
well, like, holy
a whole
cow.
different animal.
Yes.
So no, that was a vast
Yes.
improvement over what we had seen the previous year.
Okay, good.
No doubt. I'm saying that we need to go back and look at what we did in 2000, what was it, 1918?
Yeah.
And look at the way we presented AP data. That will answer some of the questions that Mr. Lacker has and Mr. Kuchar has, and certainly ones that I've had.
I want to let you know that at the next L&T meeting, Dr. Igo is bringing the SAR to you to look at again before it's populated. So to make sure that it is. So please come prepared to look at that, to make sure it's reaching what you are expecting.
Okay.
I have a question about attendance, just to be, David, this is the actual data.
Yes.
Yeah.
So remember, when we have a very small window of time, because this is just the amount of time students have been in school, if they miss one day, you don't hit the 95%.
Okay.
So one day-
Pretty low.
I think what this will do for the board over time is start asking, all good data should lead to more questions, as it does with this board. So I believe what we'll be seeing is, you're gonna be seeing some trends at different points in the year where we're gonna see a significant decline in numbers. We've already put it in the weekly update, our parents see it all the time around attendance matters, where we're talking to our students, to our parents about being in school matters. Taking a day here, a day there really does impact that percentage. So I think, I'm glad you brought that up, because it doesn't feel like, well, this couldn't be real data. No, it is.
It's really low.
We're not even above 50% of our students who have a 95, who have not missed one day.
But it will be undoubtedly, this data will move to the right direction, because you'll have a larger N set
Correct.
of potential days for them to attend. The point you made, if they've missed 2 days already, they're going to be nowhere near that 95% attendance.
Correct.
This is end of year 23.
This is end of the year from last year.
Yeah, 95%. Not 90%, 95%. This is the end of year last year.
So let me just ask a question so I understand that I'm reading this correctly. Take 9 to 12, for example. You're saying if this is the 0 to 100, that's percentage, obviously not number of students, right? It's not 50, less than 50 students had 95%?
Yeah.
Or are you saying it's less than 50%?
Less than 50% had 95. That's about 8 days.
And that's for the whole school
So
year?
as soon as a student misses, it's based on the number of enrollment days, it's 5%, but as soon as, if you're there for the full year, you miss 8 days, you're essentially tracking under 95%.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was reading it correctly. Okay, thank you.
All right, back to you.
Well, so just to close out on Dr. Gordon's question, are there any other items that we are looking forward to discussing outside of the 2 grade 12 items highlighted in green, the early college credit and the SAT? Okay, so I think that closes that out. All right.
I appreciate it.
Okay. Now, moving to item 9 on the agenda, which is our consent agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, items 9A through 9L?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. McNally. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lentz. Is there any discussion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes, Mr. Kuchert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
and Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Moving to section 10 on the agenda, which is for action. Item A, adoption of fiscal year 2023 to 2024 Community Union School District 303 budget. Can I have a motion to approve fiscal year 2023 through 2024 Community Union School District 303 budget?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe and Mr. Kuchar for the second. Is there any discussion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuchert,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item B, adoption of fiscal year 2023 through 2024 Mid-Valley Special Education Cooperative Budget. Can I have a motion to approve fiscal year 2023 through 2024 Mid-Valley Special Education Cooperative Budget?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Bell. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Lackner. Any discussion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, please take the roll call vote.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuchert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item C, long-term debt. Can I have a motion to approve the issuance of long-term debt in July 2024 to pay for construction projects planned and approved for the summer of 2024 and for the summer of 2025?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Bell. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe. Any discussion at this time?
I just had a brief question for clarification. I was unfortunately not able to attend the business services meeting where we discussed some of these scenarios. I did listen to the presentation and the communication that we had. And I just wanted to ask Mr. Attaway for clarification on the terms of both of the bonds and what that looks like. I believe they're both 20 years, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct. Both scenarios have 20-year terms on the debt that's issued.
And I think we'd spoken a little bit about what that rate would look like. And can you just, again, for my clarity and for perhaps other folks who may not know how that works, how do we get locked into an interest rate? When does that occur?
Yeah, so the interest rate is, in the scenarios that we provided, is an estimate right now based on current market rates. Plus we added a little bit of a cushion in there just in case the interest rates go up. The interest rates don't actually get locked in until we issue the debt, which wouldn't come until, I believe, June in this schedule. That is typically going out to a competitive market because this is a large municipal bond issue. We would be looking at institutional investors. So essentially when we issue, they will be competing with one another to drive the rates more and more competitively as we issue.
Thank you for that. And that's the clarity that I was seeking. I'm familiar familiarity with SBA loans and so forth. You're kind of locked into that interest rate, and so I wasn't as familiar with how this might work or if negotiation can even occur, amongst the potential lenders. So I figured I was having those questions and I couldn't figure it out, so I thought maybe a couple folks might also have some similar questions, so thank you.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the issuance?
We have it.
Oh, we already have that,
Yeah,
thank you.
sorry.
Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mrs. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mrs. Bell?
Yes.
Mr. Kuchert?
Yes.
Mr. Lackner?
Yes.
Mr. Lentz?
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave?
Abstain. Motion passes with 6 yes and 1 abstain. Moving to section 11, which is for information, we do have primarily our standing for information items that are included in each of your packets. We have the District 303 financial report, the Mid-Valley financial report, our Freedom of Information Act requests, district enrollment, and we have the annual 2023 administrator and teacher salary and benefit report. To item 12, new business. Do any board members have new business that they would like to introduce at this time? Okay. Do we have any citizen comments? Thank you. There are no citizen comments at this time. Can I have a motion to adjourn the September 11th, 2023 school board meeting?
So,
Thank you, Mr. McNally and Mr. Kuchert for the second. Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Mr. McNally?
yes.
Mrs. Bell?
Yes.
Mr. Kuchert?
Yes.
Mr. Lackner?
Yes.
Mr. Lentz?
Yes.
Mrs. McKay?
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave?
Yes, motion passes 7-0, and the meeting is adjourned at 7:38 p.m.
And we have to sign something, so.
Yes. Thank you. Mrs. Bell, don't leave. You weren't here when I made the announcement. We have the budgets to sign. Okay, thank you.
No worries.
We have to sign each copy?
Yes, each
Yeah.
copy.
There's like 3 copies, right?
I think there's more
Oh.
for 303 because we have to file in different counties, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Is it in the table?